I flew to the Philippines 7 times for her. 7 times I gave her my heart, my money, and my trust. She told me I was her future. But on my last trip, I learned the truth about her life, and it destroyed me. I was standing at Mac Tangent Cebu International Airport again, sweating through my shirt like always. The humidity hit me the second I stepped off that plane, but I didn't care. I was home. That's what I told myself anyway. This was my 7th trip to see Lara, and I knew she'd be waiting for me with that smile that made everything worth it. "Stephen!" Her voice cut through the crowd like it always did. There she was, running toward me with little Miguel at her side. The boy was 6 now, taller than when I'd seen him 4 months ago. "I missed you so much," she said, throwing her arms around my neck. I breathed in her hair, that coconut shampoo she always used. "I missed you too, sweetheart." Miguel looked up at me with those big brown eyes. "Tito, Stephen, did you bring me something?" I laughed and ruffled his hair. "Of course, buddy. It's in my suitcase." This felt right. This felt like family. I'd been sending money every month to help with his school fees, his clothes, everything a growing boy needed. And seeing him healthy, happy, calling me Tito, it made every flight, every dollar, every lonely night back in Texas worth it. "How was your flight?" Lara asked, taking my hand as we walked toward the exit. "Long. But seeing you two makes it disappear." I meant that. The 18-hour journey from Dallas, the layovers, the cramped airline seats, none of it mattered when I was here with them. In the taxi, Miguel chatted about school while Lara leaned against my shoulder. "I have something special planned for tonight," she whispered. "Just us. Miguel is staying with my sister." My heart jumped. Maybe this would be the trip. Maybe I'd finally work up the courage to ask her properly. I'd been carrying that ring in my luggage for 3 trips now, waiting for the perfect moment. "I love you," I told her, kissing the top of her head. "I love you too, Stephen, more than you know." The words sounded perfect. Everything felt perfect. I should have known that perfect things don't exist. Not for guys like me. Not in real life. But sitting in that taxi, watching the Cebu traffic blur past, holding the woman I thought was my future, I believed in perfect. I believed in us. I believed in the family we were building together. I was 53 years old, and I was finally going to get it right. 2 years earlier, I'd come to the Philippines for the first time. Not for love. Hell, I wasn't even looking for love. I just wanted somewhere warm where my retirement money would stretch further. Texas had gotten expensive, and after the divorce, after losing half of everything, I needed a fresh start. I checked into the Grand Convention Center Hotel in Cebu City, nothing fancy but clean. The receptionist was this young Filipina with the warmest smile I'd ever seen. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Cebu," she said. Her English was perfect. No accent I had to strain to understand. "Thank you. It's my first time here." "Really? Oh, you will love it here. The people are very friendly. If you need anything, just ask for Lara." Lara. Even her name sounded musical. Over the next week, every time I came through that lobby, she'd light up. "Good morning, Mr. Stephen. How was your breakfast? Or did you try the lechon yet? It's the best in the world." She wasn't like the other girls I'd met online or in the tourist areas. No heavy makeup, no pushy attitude, no immediate requests for money or gifts. She just seemed genuinely interested in making sure I had a good time in her country. On my last day, I worked up the nerve to ask her, "Lara, would you like to have dinner with me sometime? I mean, when you're not working?" She blushed. "I would like that very much. But I should tell you, I have a son. Miguel. He's 4 years old. Most guys would have run. A single mother in a foreign country? That's complicated." But something about the way she said it, protective but honest, made me respect her more. "I'd love to meet him," I said, and I meant it. That dinner changed everything. We went to a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor, and she told me about her life. How she'd been working at the hotel for 3 years, saving every peso for Miguel's education. How his father had left when she was pregnant. How she wanted to give her son opportunities she never had. "You remind me of my father," she said quietly. "He was kind like you. He died when I was 17. I felt something break open in my chest. This wasn't some bar girl looking for a quick score. This was a woman trying to build something real. I come back every few months for work, I lied. The truth was, I was already planning my next trip just to see her again. Maybe we could spend more time together. She smiled, and I was lost, completely, utterly lost. By my third trip, I wasn't just visiting Laura. I was investing in our future. At least, that's what I told myself. Stephen, Miguel needs new school supplies, she said during our second week together. We were lying in her small apartment, the fan rattling overhead. His teacher says he's very smart, but the books are expensive. How much? I asked. 2,000 pesos. But if it's too much, hey, I pulled her closer. I want to help. Miguel's education is important. I transferred the money that afternoon. It felt good, providing for them. Like I was finally the man I'd always wanted to be. On my fourth trip, it was medical bills. Miguel had gotten sick, needed medicine the public clinic couldn't provide. I hate asking you, Laura said, tears in her eyes. But I didn't know who else to call. My family has nothing. You don't have to ask, I told her. You just tell me what you need. I sent 3,000 pesos that day. Trip 5, it was rent money. Her landlord was threatening eviction. Trip 6, her mother needed surgery. Each time, Laura would cry, apologize, promise to pay me back someday. You don't understand, she'd say, holding my face in her hands. You're the only man who has ever cared about us like this. Miguel asks about you every day when you're gone. He thinks of you as his father. Those words hit me harder than anything. Father, I'd failed at that with my own kids back home. They were adults now, living their own lives, too busy to call. But here was a little boy who looked up to me, who got excited when I walked through the door. I love that kid like he's my own, I told her. And I love you. We're building something real here. We are, she agreed. You, me, and Miguel. We're a family. I started sending money between visits too. $500 a month to help with groceries, utilities, Miguel's school fees. It wasn't a fortune, but in the Philippines, it made a real difference. I was giving them stability, security, love, everything I'd wanted to give my own family but had somehow failed to provide. When I move here permanently, I told Laura during my 6th trip, we'll get a bigger place, maybe a house with a yard where Miguel can play. Really? Her eyes went wide. You would do that for us? I'd do anything for you too. You're my world now. And I meant every word. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I had a purpose. I was needed. I was loved. I was building something that mattered. The cracks started small, little things that didn't quite add up, but I pushed them down because I didn't want to see them. During my 5th trip, I tried calling Laura one evening around 9. She usually answered right away, always excited to hear from me, but this time it rang and rang. Where were you last night? I asked the next morning over breakfast. I called, but no answer. She looked startled for just a second, then smiled. Oh, I was helping my neighbor. Her baby was crying all night, and she needed help. I left my phone inside. Made sense. Laura was always helping people. That's who she was. But it happened again a few weeks later when I called from Texas. Sorry, love, she said when she called me back an hour later. I was at church. We had special prayers for my uncle. He's very sick. I thought your uncle died last year. Different uncle. My mother has many brothers. I let it slide. Families are complicated, especially big Filipino families. I didn't know all the relatives, all the connections. Who was I to question? Then came the video call where I heard a man's voice in the background, clear as day, speaking Cebuano. Who was that? I asked. Laura glanced over her shoulder, then back at the screen. That's my brother Carlo. He's fixing my sink. The landlord won't do anything. She laughed, but it sounded forced. He's always complaining about something. You know how men are. I wanted to ask more, but Miguel ran into the frame talking about his day at school, and the moment passed. Another time, I called in the middle of the afternoon, Philippines time, and she was breathless when she answered. Stephen? Hi, love. I was cleaning. Moving furniture. You sound tired. Maybe you should rest. No, I'm fine. Tell me about your day. But something felt off, the way she kept looking away from the camera. The way she seemed distracted, like part of her attention was somewhere else. Laura, is everything okay? You seem different lately. Different how? I don't know. Distant, like you're hiding something. Her face hardened for just a moment. Stephen, why would you say that? I tell you everything. I've never lied to you. I know. I'm sorry. I guess I just miss you so much that I get paranoid. You don't need to be paranoid. I love you. Only you. She reached toward the camera like she was touching my face. Promise me you trust me. I trust you completely. But even as I said it, something in my gut was screaming. Something was wrong. I just didn't want to believe it. I had it all planned out for my 6th trip. The ring, the restaurant, everything. I was finally going to ask Laura to marry me. We were at Cebu, this beautiful hotel restaurant overlooking the ocean. The sunset was perfect, golden light dancing on the water. Miguel was with Laura's sister for the night. It was just us. This is beautiful, Stephen, Laura said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Thank you for bringing me here. You deserve beautiful things, I told her. My hand was shaking. The ring box felt heavy in my pocket. Laura, I need to tell you something. What is it, love? These past 2 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You and Miguel, you've given me a reason to wake up every morning. A reason to be better than I was. Her eyes were getting teary. Stephen, I love you. I love Miguel. I want us to be a real family. I started to reach for the ring box, but she grabbed my wrist. Stephen, wait. I need to tell you something too. My heart stopped. What? My family. They're very traditional. In our culture, before a man marries a woman, he has to prove he can provide. Really provide. I send money every month. I help with everything you need. I know, and I'm grateful, but they want to see stability. Something permanent. Like property. Or a business. I stared at her. You want me to buy property here? Not want. It's just. My mother says if a man is serious about marriage, he shows it. He invests in the future. In the Philippines. The ring box stayed in my pocket. How much are we talking about? There's a condo near Miguel's school. 2 bedrooms, very nice. The owner wants to sell for 1.5 million pesos. I did the math in my head. About $27,000. My entire savings from the divorce. That's a lot of money, Laura. I know, and I would never ask if it wasn't important. But Stephen, if you're serious about us, about marriage. She squeezed my hand. This would show my family you're committed. That you're not just playing games. I felt sick. This wasn't how I'd imagined this conversation going. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. We finished dinner in mostly silence. That night, lying in bed, Laura curled up against me. I'm sorry if I upset you earlier. You didn't upset me. I just wasn't expecting. I know, but Stephen, I love you so much. And I know my family will too. Once they see how serious you are about us. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the fan rattle. $27,000, my life savings. For a condo I'd never seen, in a country where I didn't even have residency. But if it meant I could marry Laura, if it meant Miguel could really be my son, I'll look into it, I whispered. Really? Really? She kissed my cheek. You're going to make me the happiest woman alive. But lying there in the dark, I felt anything but happy. I felt trapped, like I was being tested, and I wasn't sure what the right answer was anymore. My 7th trip started perfectly. Laura met me at the airport like always. Miguel excited about the toys I'd brought him. We spent 2 beautiful days together, just like old times. Then she disappeared. I have to take Miguel to see his grandmother, she said on Wednesday morning. She's been asking for him, and she's not well. Can I come? I asked. It might be nice to meet more of your family. Something flickered across her face. Not this time, love. She's very traditional, old-fashioned. Meeting a foreigner might upset her in her condition. How long will you be gone? Maybe 2 days. 3 at most. I'll call you tonight. She didn't call that night. Or the next. Or the next. By Friday, I was going crazy. I tried her phone dozens of times. Sometimes it would ring, sometimes it went straight to voicemail. When she did answer, it was always rushed. "Stephen, I can't talk now. Grandmother is very sick. Miguel caught something too. I'm staying at my cousin's house to take care of them both." "Which hospital?" "I can come help." "No hospital. We're treating them at home. It's better this way." "Lara, this is crazy. If Miguel is sick, he needs proper medical care. I can pay." "Stephen, stop." Her voice was sharp, sharper than I'd ever heard it. "I know how to take care of my son. This is how we do things here. You wouldn't understand." The line went dead. I sat in that hotel room for 3 days, wondering what the hell was happening. I walked the streets of Cebu, ate alone, slept alone. Tourists and expats would nod at me sympathetically. They'd seen this before. The confused foreigner wondering where his girlfriend went. On Saturday night, she finally came back to the hotel. "Stephen, I'm so sorry. It was terrible. Grandmother almost died, and Miguel had such a high fever. I couldn't leave them." She looked tired, I'll give her that. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair a mess. But something was off. "Why didn't you call?" "I was worried sick. My phone died, and I forgot my charger, and the reception at my cousin's house is terrible anyway." "What's your cousin's name? Where does she live?" The questions came out harder than I intended, but I was angry, scared, confused. Lara's eyes flashed. "Why are you interrogating me? What do you think I was doing?" "I don't know. You tell me. I was taking care of my family, my sick family, while you were sitting in a nice hotel feeling sorry for yourself." "Feeling sorry for myself?" "Lara, you disappeared for 3 days without explanation. You barely returned my calls. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to trust me." She was crying now. "After everything we've been through, after all I've shared with you, you still don't trust me." I felt the fight drain out of me. She was right. If I loved her, I should trust her. If we were building a future together, I had to believe in her. "I'm sorry," I said, pulling her into my arms. "You're right. I was scared. I thought maybe you'd changed your mind about us." "Never," she whispered against my chest. "I could never change my mind about you. You're everything to me, Stephen. Everything." But even as I held her, even as I apologized, something in my gut was screaming that nothing about this made sense, and I was finally starting to listen. The truth came from a taxi driver named Ramon. I'd used him a few times during my week in Cebu, and he seemed like a good guy. Honest. On my last day, he was driving me around to buy some last-minute gifts when he started chatting. "You stay in La Hogue area, sir?" "Sometimes. My girlfriend lives there." "Ah, you have Filipina girlfriend. Very nice. What barangay?" I told him Lara's neighborhood. "Oh yes, I know that place. Many foreigners have girlfriends there. Good area." Then he said something that stopped my heart. "I pick up one foreign guy there many times, American like you. He visit Filipino lady with small boy. But she also have Filipino boyfriend live there too." My blood turned cold. "What do you mean?" "Oh yes. Very common, sir. Filipino lady, she need help with money, you know. Foreign boyfriend send money from America, local boyfriend live with her, she take care of both." He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. "The foreign guy, he know?" "Sometimes yes, sometimes no, depends. Filipino lady very smart about these things." I felt like I was going to throw up. "The American you pick up, what did he look like?" "Maybe 50 years old. Little bit fat. Gray hair. Always carry gifts for the boy." He was describing me. He was talking about me, and I didn't even know it. "Ramon, stop the car." "Sir?" "Stop the car, now." He pulled over, concerned. "Sir, you okay? You look sick." "The Filipino lady in that neighborhood, does she work at a hotel?" "I think so, yes. Reception job. Very pretty lady, very sweet. But sir, you don't look good." I was shaking. "Take me there. Take me to her house. Right now." "Sir, maybe you should. Take me there." Ramon drove in silence. When we got to Lara's street, I saw her immediately. She was sitting on the steps of her building, laughing with a Filipino man. They were holding hands. Miguel was between them, playing with a toy truck. "Wait here," I told Ramon. I walked toward them like I was in a dream, a nightmare. Lara looked up and saw me. The color drained from her face. "Stephen, what are you doing here?" The man next to her looked confused. He said something in Cebuano, and Lara responded quickly. Then he looked at me, understanding dawning on his face. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely working. "Stephen, let me explain." "Who is this man, Lara?" The Filipino guy stood up. He was younger than me, maybe 35. Handsome. "You are Stephen?" he said in English. "I am Carlo, Miguel's father." Everything clicked. Every lie, every excuse, every disappeared day. "You live here," I said. It wasn't a question. "Stephen, please." Lara was crying now. "Let me explain. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." I looked at Carlo. "How long have you been living here?" 2 years, he said quietly. "Since before Miguel started school." "And me? What am I to you?" Carlo looked at Lara, then back at me. You help with money. For Miguel's school, for food." "Lara, say you very kind man." I turned to Lara. "Tell me the truth, all of it, right now." She was sobbing. Miguel had run to her, confused by all the adult tension. "Stephen, I needed help. We needed help. You offered, and I couldn't say no. So you lied to me for 2 years. I never lied about caring for you. I do care for you. You've been so good to us. But you love him." I nodded toward Carlo. "He's Miguel's father. He lives here. This is his home." She nodded, unable to speak. I felt something die inside my chest. 2 years, 7 trips, $30,000, all for a lie. The grandmother who was sick. Where were you really? I was here, with Carlo. He'd been away working in Manila for 3 months. When he came back, you chose him. Stephen, please understand. This is complicated. In the Philippines, you chose him, I repeated. You chose him, and you kept taking my money anyway. Carlo stepped forward. "Sir, please don't be angry with Lara. I know this is hard, but she was trying to provide for Miguel. I don't make enough money. Get away from me." I looked at Miguel, who was staring up at me with those big brown eyes. The boy I thought was going to be my son. "Tito Stephen," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" I knelt down to his level. "I have to go now, buddy. But you just got here. Are you coming back?" I looked at Lara, then at Carlo, then back at Miguel. "No, buddy, I'm not coming back." Miguel started to cry. Lara was crying. Hell, I was crying too. But I turned around and walked away. Back to Ramon's taxi, back to the airport, back to my real life. The life I'd been trying so hard to escape. I changed my flight to leave the next morning instead of staying another week like I'd planned. That last night in the Cebu hotel, I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the bed, staring at the wall, trying to process what had happened. The room felt different now. Everything felt different. For 2 years, I'd walked through these streets thinking I belonged here, thinking I had a family waiting for me. Now I knew I'd been living in a fantasy, a very expensive fantasy. I kept thinking about Miguel's face when I said I wasn't coming back. That kid didn't ask for any of this. He didn't choose to be born into poverty. He didn't choose to have a father who couldn't provide enough. He didn't choose to have his mother depend on foreign men for survival. He was just a 6-year-old boy who thought I was part of his family. And maybe, in his innocent way, I was. Maybe I really was Tito Stephen to him, even if I was just a bank account to his mother. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Lara. "Stephen, please can we talk? I know you're hurt, but I can explain everything. What we had was real. My feelings for you are real. Please don't leave like this." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to call her. Part of me wanted to hear her explanation, to let her convince me that somehow this was all a misunderstanding. But I knew better now. I'd been thinking with my heart for 2 years, and it had cost me everything. It was time to think with my head. I typed back, "Take care of Miguel. That's all I ask." Then I turned off my phone. I walked to the window and looked out at Cebu City. The lights sparkled like stars. Somewhere out there, Families were sleeping peacefully. Real families with real bonds, not built on lies and financial dependency. Somewhere out there, Lara was probably lying next to Carlo, the man she really loved. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she felt relieved. Maybe she was already planning how to replace the income I'd been providing. I thought about the ring still sitting in my suitcase. 3 trips I'd carried that thing, waiting for the right moment. Thank God I never gave it to her. Thank God I found out before I bought that condo. Before I made the mistake even bigger than it already was. But sitting in that hotel room, looking out at a city that had felt like home just 24 hours earlier, I realized the money wasn't what hurt the most. It was the dream. For 2 years, I'd believed I was building something real. I'd believed a woman loved me. I'd believed a little boy saw me as his father. I'd believed I'd finally gotten life right. Now I knew it was all pretend. All performance. All lies wrapped up in enough truth to keep me sending money. The worst part? I couldn't even hate her. Not completely. Because I understood now that she was just doing what she had to do to survive. To give Miguel a better life. In her position, with a child to feed and no real opportunities, maybe I would have done the same thing, but understanding doesn't heal a broken heart. And mine was shattered completely. Back in Texas, I did what any accountant would do. I added it all up. 7 round-trip flights to Cebu. $1,200 each. $8,400. Hotels for 7 trips, averaging 10 days each. $1,500 per trip. $10,500. Meals, gifts, entertainment, taxis, everything else. Roughly $800 per trip. $5,600. Monthly support payments for 18 months. $500 each. $9,000. Emergency payments for school fees, medical bills, rent. Miguel's needs. $5,200. Total. $38,700. $38,700. Nearly $40,000 over 2 years. That was more than I'd spent on my truck. More than I'd spent on any single thing in my life except my house. But the money was just numbers on paper. What really cost me was harder to calculate. The opportunity cost of believing in something that wasn't real. The emotional cost of loving people who saw me as an ATM with feelings. The psychological cost of being made a fool for 2 years straight. I thought about my ex-wife sometimes. You always fall for sob stories, she used to say. Someone cries, and you open your wallet. She wasn't wrong. But this felt different because it was. Sarah had been my age, financially independent, college-educated. She chose to leave me for reasons that had nothing to do with money. Lara was trapped by poverty, limited by circumstances I couldn't imagine. That made her actions understandable, even if they weren't forgivable. I found myself wondering about the other foreign men in Cebu. How many of us were there? How many lonely middle-aged guys sending money to women who had local boyfriends? How many of us thought we were special, thought we were different, thought we were loved? Ramon, the taxi driver, had made it sound common, normal, just business. Maybe that's all it ever was. Business. I was the client, Lara was the service provider, and Miguel was the product that made it feel legitimate. A ready-made family for a man too old and too lonely to build one naturally. The hardest part was admitting how much I'd wanted it to be real. How desperately I'd needed to believe that someone could love me again, that I could matter to someone, that I could be a father figure, a provider, a man worth respecting. For 2 years, that's exactly what I thought I was. For 2 years, every month when I sent that money, every time I booked another flight, every time Lara told me she loved me, I felt useful, important, needed. Now I knew I was just being used. But the need that drove me to the Philippines in the first place, that was still there. The loneliness was still there. The desire to matter was still there. And that scared me more than the financial loss. Because I knew how easy it would be to do it again, to find another Lara in another city, to convince myself that this time would be different, this time it would be real. This time I wouldn't be played for a fool. But I would be. Because desperate men don't learn from other people's mistakes. We only learn from our own. And sometimes not even then. It's been 6 months since I left Cebu for the last time. 6 months since I learned the truth about Lara and Carlo and the life I thought I was building. People ask me if I hate her. I don't. I think she did what she thought she had to do. In her situation, with limited options and a child to raise, maybe I would have made the same choices. Maybe survival trumps honesty when you're desperate enough. But understanding someone's motives doesn't mean accepting their actions. And it doesn't mean I was wrong to feel betrayed, used, and foolish, because I was all those things. I was a lonely man who confused financial dependency with love, gratitude with affection, and necessity with choice. That's on me as much as it's on her. The hardest lesson I've learned is that love you have to buy isn't love at all. It's a transaction disguised as emotion. And transactions end when one party stops paying. Real love survives without financial support. Real love exists whether you're rich or poor, generous or broke. Real love doesn't disappear when the money stops flowing. What Laura and I had wasn't love. It was an arrangement that benefited both of us in different ways. She got financial security for her and Miguel. I got the illusion of being loved and needed. It worked until I discovered it wasn't real. Then it collapsed completely. Do I regret going to the Philippines? Not entirely. I learned things about myself that I needed to know. I learned that I'm more vulnerable to loneliness than I realized. I learned that I'll believe what I want to believe, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. I learned that hope can blind you to reality if you let it. I also learned that there are good people in the Philippines, just like everywhere else. And there are people who will take advantage of kindness, just like everywhere else. The country isn't the problem. The culture isn't the problem. Desperation on both sides is the problem. Mine and hers. Will I go back? I don't know. Part of me wants to stay away forever, to avoid the temptation of falling into the same trap again. But part of me thinks maybe I could go back differently. As a tourist, not a savior. As a visitor, not a provider. As someone enjoying a beautiful country without trying to buy a place in it. Right now I'm focused on building a life here in Texas that doesn't depend on someone else needing me. I'm volunteering at a local food bank, coaching Little League, staying busy in ways that matter without requiring me to be anyone's financial lifeline. I'm learning to be alone without being lonely. It's harder than it sounds, but it's necessary, because until I can be happy by myself, I'll always be vulnerable to someone who promises to fill that emptiness, even if the promise is a lie. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, be careful, be skeptical, be honest about your motives and theirs. Ask yourself if you're being loved or being used. And remember that real relationships are built on equality, not dependency. If you have to pay for someone's affection, you're not buying love, you're renting it. And the lease always expires eventually. 7 trips to the Philippines taught me that. It was an expensive education, but it was worth learning. Even if I wish I'd learned it a different way.